Hello, I'm Dixie Michelle, and today what I wanted to talk about and actually do a demonstration is how I make fingerboards for mandolins and guitars. Now, I've been doing this for about 40 years, so when I first started, they didn't have a lot of fancy tools in those days. I know the factories used gang saws and electric saws to cut them all at once. They did a quick and easy job. But in the old days, they didn't have computers, which meant that some of the old factory-made guitars, the scale wasn't quite right. And nobody seemed to notice in those days. It's only lately that we've got computers that they've come up with these new scale lengths that are absolutely perfect. So that's why I buy one of these scale length things from one of the supply houses. And this one is actually made to do a Martin D28 25.3 scale length. Now the scale length, what they're talking about there is the distance between the nut and the bridge on the first string. Now all the other strings are a little further back in that the saddle is slanted on the guitar and a mandolin. So when you talk about the scale length, you're talking about the distance between the nut and the bridge on the first string, and that's an accurate measurement. So a standard Gibson mandolin fingerboard used almost a 14-inch scale. It was 13 7/8. This is an example of one of them right here, and the fret slots have been cut in this one. What I'm doing today is making a fingerboard for a 1930s national mandolin, which used a longer scale length, a 15-inch scale length. So what I've found that I can do here is use this Martin scale length and start it on the 8th fret. And then I'll have what is very close to a 15-inch scale. So that's what I'm going to use this for today, is I'm going to mark where the frets go on a 15-inch scale for a mandolin. And I'm using a guitar scale, and I'm starting it on the 8th fret. So if that makes sense to you, that's what I'm going to do. Now, I've got it clamped in this little jig here that won't let it move, so all of them are going to be lined up. So I'll put on my little visor here so I can see what I'm doing. Take off these glasses. And I start with putting the saw down in this little notch and pull it. Okay, now I'm pulling for, you see it doesn't cut on the pull stroke, it cuts on the forward stroke. So pulling it is a very accurate way to scribe a nice little notch in there, exactly where that fret goes. Now this slot is actually a little wider than my saw blade, so I'm making sure that I keep it up against this right side. For every time I do this, I'm making sure it's right up against the right side with my thumb. Pull it. Okay, that marks it. I'm going to the next one. Now if you notice, I keep my thumb up against the blade to keep it wedged right against the side, so it's always the same. It's always the same side. And I put my thumb up there and draw that thing down. Now that on the pull stroke, it doesn't do any cutting. It just kind of scores it. Okay, now that I've finished all the scribing, I've marked where every fret's going to go. I'm going to tear this setup down, and I'm going to do another setup using my center line that I talked about earlier. Okay, we're back on this thing now. What I'd like to explain here is that my center line that I've drawn down the center of this fingerboard is right on the center all the way through, and that's going to be helpful for many stages. But right now what it's doing is I've got a scribed line on this piece of angle iron, and I've laid this right on my scribed line. Now what that scribed line is for is it's absolutely parallel to this surface of this angle iron. And then I've got this thing that I made that's got an extra piece of wood that's glued onto a regular square. And this is what I've been using for about 40 years to do this with. And what this does, it rides on this outside of this angle iron here, and it's absolutely square no matter where it goes. So this is the process of how to do it. First put the saw into this slot that you previously cut. Draw it back. It's squarely in that slot. And it's headed right across there. So then I put this here. And that's got a nice little slot that it goes in. So that's why it works so well. You put this up here, hold it up against here tight, and you start to saw. That's enough to start with. So what that does, it scores it right across. See, it's not cut very deep. Now I bring in this other saw. It's a handy Japanese saw that's made for the purpose of bottoming out these frets. So this little gauge is screwed on here just for the purpose of not letting this saw cut any deeper than it does. And that's right at the bottom of the fret, so you don't saw all the way through the fretboard. So here you go. You use this to clean up that score mark that you put on there to start with. You don't need to square on it now because you're already started. And this is a Japanese saw. It cuts on the pull stroke. It's a very nice fine-tooth saw. So I'm being very careful to stay in that slot. I don't want to make it any wider. I'm staying perpendicular. And I can feel when I start bottoming out. There it goes, and I'll rock it back and forth because this is a radius fingerboard. So I'm rocking it back and forth. There, and I think I've cut it all the way deep. That's what it's going to look like. That's for each fret. So here goes another one. Take my special square, my fine-tooth saw, put that saw in the slot. Pull it back. It's in that slot. Make sure this is up here square. Go to side. Okay, that scored it. So now I'm going to finish it up with my Japanese saw. Put that squarely in that slot. Don't want to make that slot any bigger. Very careful. There's no need to go real fast with this. You just be real careful with it. That's got that one. We've got 2 down. And about 15 to go. Okay. Another one. I'm going to move this clamp. Now I want you to notice something here. I've got 3 clamps on this. Now there's a good reason for that. If I take one of them off, there's still 2 holding it down. So I can move these clamps all the way and they won't get in the way of my sawing. So that's the purpose, always having 3 clamps on that. So I'm going to continue cutting this until it's all the way down to the end. That would be where the first fret goes, and then I'm going to cut it where the nut goes. So that's the process of how I do this, and I've been doing it for a long time. This is a finished one. It's exactly the same scale length. This is what it's going to come out looking like. I thought I would mention that I get my supplies from 2 suppliers. One is Luthier's Mercantile, which is on the West Coast, and the other is Stuart McDonald, which is in Ohio. And both of these suppliers can furnish you with tools and wood and just about everything you need to make guitars, banjos, mandolins, fiddles, whatever you want to make. So go Google these things up, Stuart McDonald and Luthier's Mercantile. They're very good outfits. I've been dealing with them for years.